Hi, everyone. Give us just a few minutes as we get set up here. In case you haven't been to one of our webinars before, we recommend that you use Chrome as your browser for this webinar for the best viewing and audio experience. I'm going to go through just a couple introduction slides to give people time to join the webinar. So I'll just start doing that now. Thank you for joining us today for today's webinar, Surveying RCV in 2020. The webinar will begin shortly. My name is Chris Hughes, and I am the Policy Director for the Ranked Choice Voting Resource Center. I will be your moderator for today's session. Due to a large number of attendees, we have muted participants to reduce audio interference. For better viewing, you may expand or minimize your menu control panel by clicking on the orange tab located on the panel's left edge. If you have technical issues, please use the chat feature located at the bottom of your control panel to send us a message, and we will try to assist you. Questions or comments related to the webinar may also be submitted using this chat feature. The webinar will take about an hour, followed by a brief question and answer period. Our staff will answer questions we cannot address during the live session in a follow-up document, which will be available later, along with a recording of this session. For those who are not familiar with the Ranked Choice Voting Resource Center, we provide a compilation of best practices and firsthand experiences from jurisdictions that have used ranked choice voting with a focus on election administration. We are a 501c3 nonpartisan nonprofit. Our website, rcvresources.org, and other materials have been developed as educational tools for election administrators, policymakers, voters, candidates, and others. Our presenters today will be me, Chris Hughes. I'm going to turn my video on now and say hello. We also have George Gilbert, who's an election administration consultant with us, Kelly Sechrist, our development director. We've got a bit of an echo, by the way. Kelly Sechrist, our development director, Colleen Potter, the regional coordinator for the Resource Center, and our president, Gary Bartlett. So without any further ado, I'm going to dive right in. So just so you all know, we're going today to just give a brief overview of all the ranked choice voting elections held this fall, the ranked choice voting ballot measures that went direct to voters, and some things to look forward to in 2021. We've got a lot to cover, and we want to leave time for questions, so we may move a bit fast. And for anyone who doesn't know, ranked choice voting is a voting method where voters rank candidates in order of preference. We count up first choices. If anybody has a majority of votes or enough votes to win, they get elected. And if nobody has enough votes to win, we eliminate the candidate in last place and count the next ranked candidate on each of those ballots instead. Those rounds of counting and elimination continue until someone emerges with a majority or all seats up for election are filled. So with that said, I'm going to talk about 4 jurisdictions that used ranked choice voting for either the first time this year or expanded their use of ranked choice voting this fall. First up is Benton County, Oregon. Corvallis, which is home to Oregon State University, is the Benton County seat to help you place it in Oregon. Benton County adopted ranked choice voting in 2016 after a ballot measure campaign and implemented it for the first time this year. They're actually the first place in Oregon to use ranked choice voting since a town called Coos Bay used proportional ranked choice voting, which elects multiple candidates at once, in the 1940s. They had 53,154 voters at least turn up in this election this year, which is about 86% turnout in Benton County. Benton County adopted single winner ranked choice voting for its county commission offices. 2 of those 3 seats had more than 3 candidates running this year, so they had to run a ranked choice voting election. But both commissioners in those 2 contests emerged with a majority of first choice votes. A screenshot of their ballot is on this slide. Benton County used election systems and software equipment. They're one of the bigger voting system vendors out there. And used our ranked choice voting universal tabulator software that we've developed internally that can run the round by round count in ranked choice voting as a verification tool for their results. Benton County ran a pretty big ranked choice voting education campaign, including a giant ranked choice voting education website that you saw a screenshot of when I first started this section with Sam Sasquatch, their, as they call him, legendary spokesperson. It's at bentonbetterballot.com if you're interested. They held virtual town halls, they tabled at community events, and they had flyers and sandwich boards up all over the county to make sure people knew what ranked choice voting is and how to mark their ballots. Next up, we've got Maine. Maine adopted ranked choice voting in 2016, implemented it for the first time in 2018, and expanded ranked choice voting to president this year. And that makes them actually the first state ever to use ranked choice voting for a presidential election. Their turnout this year hit at least 808,000 voters. Ballots are still being counted in some jurisdictions and will have official results and a final vote total in a week or two. But at least 75% of eligible voters in Maine turned out to vote this year. Maine, like Benton County, uses single winner ranked choice voting and had, in the fall, 3 or more candidates in contests for president and Senate. They also had a few ranked choice voting primaries this summer for their state legislative offices. The Secretary of State's office, when I reached out to them about their voter education work this year, said they had a ton on their plate. I think that's true for pretty much every election administrator in the country because they were handling a surplus of mail-in ballots because of COVID-19, in addition to just a high interest and high turnout election. Despite that, they put a lot of work into updating some of the ranked choice voting education materials they have in the state, including creating new explainers about the ranked choice voting counting process in Maine, answering voter questions about how to mark ranked choice voting ballots, actually countering some ranked choice voting misinformation that one of the political parties in Maine was putting out there, and just making sure that all of their materials were polished and clear and usable for voters. Interesting fact, though, and this is something we saw in a few places this year, this fall was actually the first time no ranked choice voting contests in Maine went beyond the first round of counting, as in every election that had more than 3 candidates, the presidential race, the race for Senate, someone emerged with a majority of first choice votes. So there was no need for rounds of counting in Maine. Now we have Portland, Maine. Portland has used ranked choice voting for their mayoral elections since 2011, but they expanded their use to city council and school board elections this fall after a successful ballot measure campaign in the spring. 42,097 voters cast ballots in the election, and that's actually a final turnout number for a turnout of 67% of registered voters. Portland also uses single winner ranked choice voting and uses ES&S again, just as the state of Maine and Benton County do for their counting. They had 3 ranked choice voting contests this year: their city council at large seat, a school board at large seat, and city council district 4. The city council at large seat actually elected the city's first Indigenous council member, and you can see a screenshot of one of the ranked choice voting ballots used in Portland this fall on this screen. Finally, Eastpointe, Michigan. Eastpointe, if you tuned into this webinar last year, you heard a lot about Eastpointe. But Eastpointe is a suburb just outside Detroit on the northeastern edge of the city. They implemented ranked choice voting for the first time last year after they adopted proportional ranked choice voting to elect their city council in order to settle a Voting Rights Act lawsuit. They had a turnout of just over 18,000 voters, which is really big for Eastpointe. Not quite certified yet. The results are actually going to certification today, so we'll have final numbers just after this webinar. They also used single winner ranked choice voting because in this case, last year, their mayor was elected, but she was a member of the city council. So she vacated a seat on the city council, leaving a vacancy. The city appointed someone to fill that seat for the last year, but Michigan law requires that the remainder of the term, which is just 1 more year until the next election in 2021, law requires that that vacancy be filled in a special election. So they held a single winner ranked choice voting election to fill the rest of that term. Just like all the other cities I've covered, they also use ES&S equipment, but to actually run the round by round count of their election, they use the the Ranked Choice Voting Universal Tabulator, our software that is compatible with ES&S data. Eastpointe put a lot of work, like a lot of cities this year, I think, into updating their elections website, into creating a new voter education video, creating virtual candidate trainings, and holding virtual town halls. They worked really closely with Grace Ramsey at Democracy Rising in putting together all of those materials. And one last thing before I hand you off to George, this is a section of Eastpointe's ballot. This is how they display ranked choice voting to their voters. They had, I want to say it was something more than 20 contests on their ballot this year. So they had to put a lot of time into, making sure that ranked choice voting fit on the ballot effectively, while also fitting all of their other contests on the ballot. And this is what they wound up with. So with all of that, I'll pass you off to George Gilbert.
Well, good afternoon and good morning, depending on where you are. I'm just going to cover briefly 5 additional cities who are running ranked choice voting, having done so for a number of years. Some of them made a few changes. Others were pretty much doing the same thing that they have always done. So of these, we had in these 5 jurisdictions, we had over close to 500,000 voters, and we had 10 RCV tabulation contests. We had 31 total contests, but only 10 of them went to RCV tabulation. Now we start with Takoma Park in Maryland. Takoma Park's been doing ranked choice voting for a number of years. Interestingly, Takoma Park seems to use a different voting system each time they run this election. This is the first time that Takoma Park has run its municipal election, which has 6 ward representatives and the mayor running as RCV candidates. But this is the first time they've done it in November, along with a general election. In this case, none of the seats that were up for election ended up with more than 2 candidates running. So obviously they had, no ranked choice voting tabulation to do. In Takoma Park, the city runs its municipal election, while the county runs all the general elections. And I was talking to Jessie there the other day, and she indicated basically they had no problems. Obviously, they had no rounds of RCV tabulation. But they ran the election for the city separate, and they sent out a separate ballot from the general election ballot. It was as if there were 2 different entities conducting 2 different elections simultaneously. So the voters in the city received 2 ballots if they requested one. Almost all of the municipal election was conducted by mail this time around. Even though they had no RCV tabulation to do, since there were only 2 candidates for each contest, they were prepared to use the universal RCV tabulator to do their RCV tabulation rounds had they been required. So we were pleased to be able to provide that tool for them so that they could conduct their tabulation. They have been counting by hand for the last several years. This time they were prepared to do so automatically using the universal RCV tabulator. San Leandro, California, they've been running ranked choice voting elections for several years. They had 3 city council district representatives, but no contest, once again, had more than 2 candidates. So even though they were using a new voting system, it was similar to the old voting system. I think they're a Dominion user. They just upgraded their Dominion system. They had no incidents reported with respect to ranked choice voting, and no tabulation was required there. So nothing to report in San Leandro, really. Berkeley, California also used this. This is all Alameda County. Let me get back to Berkeley. Alameda County has a new voting system. It applies to Berkeley, Oakland, and San Leandro. They had 4 city council district representatives and the mayor. One of those city council districts had only 2 candidates, and 2 of the council seats and the mayor's race had a majority on the first choice winner. So there was 1 contest that required tabulations by round. The RCV tabulation rounds have not yet been posted, and I might mention the both Berkeley and Oakland, where they do have RCV tabulation to conduct multiple rounds. If you go on their results website, it says for full RCV tabulation, call the Registrar of Voters office. Well, they don't post those rounds, and they've received some complaints about that from the citizens out there. So for those of you who are thinking in terms of what to do with your RCV results, they had 5 city council seats and 4 school district seats up for election in November. The city attorney contest, also the city attorney, they had only 2 candidates there, and 2 of the council seats had majority first choice winners. So 2 of the council seats and all 4 of the school district seats required rounds of tabulation. Number of those school district seats were very competitive, with candidates receiving anywhere from first choice candidates receiving anywhere from up to 45%, but sometimes the first choice candidate received as low as, below 30%. So it will be interesting when they finally post those results to see how these contests came out. As I said, the only complaint that I've heard out of Alameda County was the fact that these RCV tabulation results were not being publicly posted. So it seems that they had no additional problems related to their ranked choice voting election. In San Francisco, we had some things happening interesting there. They had 6 members of the Board of Supervisors elected. Only one contest had just 2 candidates, and 2 of them produced first choice majority winners. So we had 3 additional contests. One of them produced a candidate with 48%, which was close to that 50% threshold. And they achieved that 50% threshold in the 3rd round of tabulation. And all of their tabulation results, by the way, are posted online. So we have, I think, what is not official results here, but I believe the numbers are final. The other 2 supervisor contests started with 7 candidates. Both of them required 6 rounds of RCV tabulation to produce an apparent winner. In one case, the first choice leader right now has a 126 vote margin out of 36,000 votes cast. So as they finalize the count out there, they're still not able to call that election, and it's very close. In the other, the apparent winner at this point started in 3rd place when they counted the first choice votes, but they now lead with a 2,000 plus vote margin. I would note that this is the 2nd time since they started doing ranked choice voting in 2004, the 2nd time that the 3rd place finisher in first choice votes has become the eventual winner in San Francisco. So most of the time, as we have seen, the first choice winner has gone on to win, or someone has won on the first choice count. Every now and then, the 2nd choice winner will overtake the first choice winner, and even a 3rd place first choice candidate can win. And in this case, it looks like they're in pretty good position to do so. So that's pretty much of a summary of what has happened in Maryland and in California. So at this point, I'll turn you back over to Chris.
Thanks, George. So I saw some in the chat. People were having issues with their connection, so I guess they probably won't hear me say this. Hit the red reconnect button at the top of your screen, though, and it should reestablish your connection. I will give just a few seconds for people to do that. We are already crunched for time, but I want to make sure people are, can tune in to the webinar today. While we wait for people to do that, I will give a brief wrap up of this last section. So based on numbers reported so far, and these numbers will hopefully go up a bit more, at least 1,460,000 voters cast votes in ranked choice voting elections this year. which I guess I don't know for sure that it's the most ever in a ranked choice voting year, but I expect it's up there if it's not number one. Okay, looks like Reconnect worked for everybody. Good to know. This is definitely a best practice for us to learn about for next time that happens. And 18 candidates were elected in ranked choice voting contests, as in there were 18 contests with at least 3 candidates running in ranked choice voting elections this year. So now we're going to move on to, again, a brief survey of all the places that voted on adopting ranked choice voting this year. That's 2 states and 5 cities. If you're on this webinar, you probably heard about all of these, but we like to collect everything in one place and just get a baseline level of information in one place for everybody. So I am going to talk a bit about the 2 states, Alaska and Massachusetts, and there's certainly more to learn about these campaigns than we're going to cover in the presentation today. So if you're interested, reach out to the campaigns, reach out to us. We're happy to connect you with people on the ground to learn more about how these campaigns worked. So first, Alaska. The Alaska for Better Elections campaign asked voters if they wanted to adopt a suite of reforms to Alaska elections, moving to a blanket primary system where all candidates, regardless of party, appear on the same ballot in the primary election. 4 candidates then advance from that election to a single winner ranked choice voting general election. And we should note here that this actually won't impact the presidential primaries in Alaska, but it will impact every other primary, including primaries for Congress and Senate. The measure also included campaign finance reforms requiring greater transparency from campaigns about their donors. The campaign argues that these reforms will help lessen toxic partisanship in Alaska and improve their representative government, their democracy. The AP, the Associated Press, called a win for this ballot measure on Tuesday. This makes Alaska just the 2nd state to adopt ranked choice voting statewide. Would not have adopted ranked choice voting for president and a few other lower level offices in Massachusetts. Clips that is in the middle of a 3-part series about the work done over the last few years in Massachusetts to get on the ballot. 1.5 million people voted to adopt ranked choice voting, but 1.8 million voted no. As with any campaign, there's a lot of data to sift through to begin to analyze vote data about what drove people to vote no. They also do have a couple local adoptions that should get up and running in the next couple years. A couple cities in Massachusetts have adopted ranked choice voting, and you'll hear more about that later. So now I'm going to pass it off to Kelly, who's going to talk about all the cities that voted on ranked choice voting this fall.
Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for being with us today. And we're glad you're here and hope you're finding this informative. So Albany, California is located just on the east side of the San Francisco Bay Area in Alameda County. I know we've already talked about a few other locations out in Alameda County that also use ranked choice voting. And so organizers, Voter Choice Albany, were led by Pedro Hernandez and Jim Lindsay, really helped to identify the problem that the lack of local government representation for people of color and working class citizens. So as they were looking at that, they realized that multi-seat, multi-winner RCV would be a good way to address this issue. So as that's how Measure BB was born, and they started working to get it on the ballot. So Albany is actually one of 125 charter cities in California that will allow them to make changes to how they do local elections. Other cities that don't hold a charter actually cannot do that in California. So that was an important part of this. So they had to, identify that initially to make sure they could make the changes without the state. Initially in February, volunteers started gathering signatures in order to get it on the ballot. They were about halfway there, about 600 signatures, and then COVID hit. And as we know, that has changed many things this year, not just election related. But once that hit, they were unable to continue to gather signatures. So the only other way that they could get it on the ballot for this particular election was to go to the city council. So organizers appealed to the city council, and because they felt like they would have gotten enough signatures to do that through the other method if COVID were not part of the equation, they did approve the putting it on the ballot. So it had a lot of support in Albany. League of Women Voters, the local Democratic Party, the Sierra Club. Bay Rising is an organization that works for empowerment for people of color and working class citizens of the area. Lots of people gathering together to show their community how this could work and get better representation. Little bit of opposition. They said, mostly it was a few rebuttals. There was one town council member that voiced some concerns about it in a blog post, but overall they had a pretty good support base in the city. So how did it turn out? They have about 12,000 registered voters there, and 9,700 of them voted. And as you can see, it was a runaway. It was 73%, 7,143 votes at 80% voter turnout. So that's a lot of voices in the city being heard to the 2,607 votes. So organizers were actually they knew that there was a lot of support, but they were very excited to see that it really was something that the city wanted and believed in. So they knew that this would be a great way to address the proportional representation in their city. So they also they used Dominion, ImageCast Central, and ImageCast X voting equipment and Democracy Live. Our thing to know in this is that RCV does require all data to be centralized, and they'll work on those things to figure out how to make that work the best in their community. All right. Next up is Eureka, California, and it's just a little bit north between San Francisco and Portland, Oregon. You may be familiar with the giant California redwoods, and if you are, that is located, those are right around Humboldt Bay, which is where Eureka is. So I spoke with Caroline Griffith a little bit. She's one of the organizers who led the movement for change. And one thing that she said to me that really was resounding and interesting is that they had really been looking at ranked choice voting in Eureka, California for a while. And they had talked about it in some strategic visioning they did a few years ago. So when she came about and said, hey, I think we need to look at this again, she was joined by the North Coast People's Alliance, who is another group that's worked on a lot of issues in their city, well trusted and well known. And the campaign Yes on C was born to help them improve their elections and allow voters to really express their opinions about leadership. And that's what they shared with citizens in their city as they were campaigning for this to be put on the ballot and to be passed in their city. So the problem there is a little bit different. They were concerned with elections where candidates are elected without the majority vote, which is something that, as we know, ranked choice voting identifies or expresses. Several wards in the city over the past couple of years had multiple candidates, and they were winning with, a lot lower votes than 50% plus one. In fact, one of the local newspapers reported, the Lost Coast Outpost in October, that back in 2002, one of the mayor's races actually had 7 candidates. They said they called it a wild race in the newspaper, but they actually had 7 candidates, and the mayor was actually elected with about 38% of the vote. So they knew they wanted to address some of these issues and figure out a way to make voters' voices more powerful. So the solution to that is, of course, to make a change to their charter. And luckily, Eureka is also one of the 125 charter cities in California. So they began to work on that by talking with the city council. They really had to continue to go back over and over. And that's something I heard or have seen through lots of these campaigns is, it's really about the citizens' voices to get these on the ballot. So finally, the city council did vote 5-0 to put the question to voters for the November election. And they, of course, just like all of us, they had to educate voters in that area using different means than we normally do an election, where they would be able to go door to door, or maybe, set up at street festivals or those kinds of things. But they did do some phone banking. They did do some drops of door to door literature information, where they would, drop literature but not actually talk with the people, and indicated that word of mouth really helped a lot, because Eureka is a small town, and so they were able to, still have people share the information with each other without having, while still staying safe in the COVID restrictions. League of Women Voters also jumped in and helped them quite a bit. And of course, they said in Eureka they didn't have a whole lot of opposition. It was more voices that were typically coming to town meetings to oppose other things as well. So, all right, so what was the outcome in Eureka? It passed in Eureka with 61% of the vote. They were very excited to know that, and they had it was about 51% turnout, so not quite as high as we saw in Albany, but it passed with 5,974 votes to 3,752 votes. And of course, these are not the certified results. We'll have those soon, but these are as of yesterday afternoon. You can also note, I thought it was interesting in California, they didn't really let us know this in all the states, but in Eureka, there were 760 folks who did not vote on this measure. And of course, one overvote, which means they voted both yes and no. So the thing to know about Eureka is this is not really the final stopping point for them. Their charter has now been changed so that they can actually use ranked choice voting, but the council will have to pass an ordinance to govern how the ranked choice voting elections will proceed. So now I'm going to turn it over to Colleen for the next city.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, let's see if we can move that slide forward. I'm going to ask Rosemary to move the slide. There we go. All right, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Boulder, Colorado. So Boulder is known as a moderately progressive city. Interestingly, I think this election might have been different than any of the others I'm familiar with, because it was actually for two issues. Currently in Boulder, they elect their city council, and then the city council members elect the mayor. And one of the concerns that arose in the city is people wanted to elect the mayor directly instead of having the city council choose the mayor. And so what happened was there was a grassroots effort, and they were able to get the signatures necessary for an initiative petition to get this issue on the ballot. Although ultimately the city council changed that language a little bit to put when it was actually put on the ballot. There were a lot of people involved in this measure. There were two different groups. There was Yes on 2E, and there was also a group called Our Mayor, Our Choice. And so it's difficult to parse out whether this election was so successful because they were concerned about the direct election of the mayor, or as much about the type of election with ranked choice voting. But we'll show you the numbers in just a second about how successful it was. The local newspaper, they did have some concerns because they did feel like putting these two issues together could have been confusing for the voters, but ultimately they endorsed it. There wasn't any vocal opposition on social media, or at least on the websites that were posted. There wasn't anyone. They were actually looking for someone to provide an opposition statement and weren't able to find one. So unless there is a change in the future, the mayor will be elected through ranked choice voting and the city council through traditional voting, but there is already conversation about changing that as well. All right, let's move that next slide. And you can see the results, a resounding yes. There were, of 71,000 registered voters, there were 41,000 yes votes for a total of just over 78%, and just 11,538 no votes for 21%. Again, the campaign's focused on the benefits of both, so it's difficult to know, but the city will have to upgrade their ability to be able to to provide a ranked choice voting election, but they're intending to do that, and we'll watch Boulder and see what happens in the future with their city council elections. And we'll turn it back to Kelly.
So Minnesota actually had two cities that they had ranked choice voting on the ballot. And Fair Vote Minnesota, with organizers Laura Carbone and David Haig, organized these in their individual towns. And let's talk a little bit about first Minnetonka. So Minnetonka is a suburb city. It's about 8 miles outside of Minneapolis, and it has about 50,000 people. So just a little bit bigger than the cities we were talking about in California. And David Haig, who is a citizen of the city, really started thinking about options to address an issue that he saw in their elections locally. So for local elections, for mayor and city council, they were often having to run very expensive primaries, having about 4% of the people that registered to vote in their city turn out, and they would be spending about $50,000 per cycle per primary. And that didn't feel like, one, a fiscally responsible thing to do, and two, it didn't feel like the voices of the people were being heard. They also noticed that sometimes it was a little hard to get candidates to sign on because it was really challenging to face the prospect of having to run a primary campaign and turn right around and run a regular campaign if you were one of the primary winners. So they found that ranked choice voting would address that, and David started doing some research. And actually, I thought it was interesting. I spoke with him. He told me a little bit of the story. He met up with the Fair Vote Minnesota folks at a street fair. Obviously, this was pre-COVID, and they were able to help him connect with other people in the city who were interested in ranked choice voting through some outreach they had done. So they were able to link arms and join forces. So the way this went down in Minnetonka is it really started back in 2019. David and what eventually became a group of citizens asked that RCV be considered and met with the city council. So the city council said, okay, we will, after several meetings, said, let's form a commission. Let's see what this might look like if we did implement this in Minnetonka. As you can see, Minnetonka, sort of like the cities in California, holds its own charter. So they are able to create ballot measures like City Question 1, that would allow them to make a change to how they do local elections. So once the commission was formed, they started to study RCV. And of course, again, COVID happened, and they were not really able to meet in the way that they normally would meet. The city council was not really able to meet in the way they would normally meet, but they still put it out for public opinion and thoughts. And then the Charter Commission actually in July of 2020, so July of this year, they recommended that they reject the ordinance and reject RCV completely. And the city council came back and said, no, we think we'd actually like to put this to the vote of the people. And that's what they did. So in August of 2020 is when they actually voted to put it on the ballot. So how do they educate the public? Early on, I think, it's a nice small town kind of thing. They were able to do farmers markets and city festivals and local breweries and have some fun RCV events. But then once the restrictions and shelter in place came into play, they really relied on things like Facebook and search engine optimization ads, direct mail, and phone banking. It's hard to run an election in a situation like we have. So I know they had to work a little extra hard to get the information out. All right, so what was the outcome? So the outcome is that it passed. The yes votes, 18,475 at 54%. No votes, 15,293 at 45%. With an 85% turnout. So, that's really amazing turnout in the city. And voters were able to voice their opinion. It's interesting because they did have wide support. The current governor, current Senator Tina Smith, and then former Senator Dave Durenberg, and former Governor Arne Carlson really stepped up to the plate and supported the measure too. But they did have some opposition from some folks in the city that tried to turn it into more of a partisan issue, even though it's a nonpartisan issue. In this city, they actually use ES&S, DS200 equipment for all their voting. So, and DS850 as well. So they'll be working to figure out the best way to implement that in their community. So, all right, I'm going to turn it back over to Colleen.
All right, thank you. So I'm going to talk about Bloomington, Minnesota. And like Kelly said, Bloomington is similar to Minnetonka in that they are a charter city. So they were able to get this on the ballot when 85% of the cities in Minnesota would not legally be able to adopt ranked choice voting. Bloomington is a larger city. There are over 85,000. And the dynamics are a little bit different because of the nature of the city. They're a little more urban, more people engaged in the campaign. And again, like Minnetonka, it was primarily started by one woman who was from the League of Women Voters, Marcia. And Laura, that we talked to, told us a little bit about how she was very passionate about it and was able to start that organization, and they got together. And I think they worked together with Minnetonka and were able to be successful in that. Interestingly, they had a great website, probably one of the best I've seen, very professional. They had a group of school kids out there with their campaign Yes on 3 t-shirts on, and they were able to get a lot of support. And also, like Kelly mentioned, they're even though these are nonpartisan races and local elections, historically, because of the predominance of the Democratic Party in that city, a lot of times those who aligned with the Republican Party were able to win because of the spoiler effect, which we know that ranked choice voting kind of eliminates that. And so their perspective from the Yes on 3 campaign organizers was that these people from the Republican Party were trying to make it partisan so they could get more support against ranked choice voting to maintain their ability to win in these spoiler type elections. Again, as mentioned by Kelly, there was a lot of support from previous elected officials, current elected officials, and I wanted to share a quote. She mentioned former Senator Dave Durenberger, who said, "Ranked choice voting is the only way I know of that will get people back to the polls in a meaningful way and replace plurality take-all elections with majority winner elections." And that was really the focus in Bloomington, was would this do what the majority of the people wanted it to do, to really represent their wishes. Let's go to the next slide and look at those numbers. And of 59,914 registered voters, it was a close election, 25,332 yeses for just over 51%, and just over 24,000 or 48.8% no votes. So they were relieved and excited that it was successful, and looking forward to seeing how the election goes in the future. And that's all I have. And I forgot who's next. Are we back to Kelly?
Next up is Gary.
Oh, Gary, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Excuse me. I want to thank everyone for being here today, and certainly hope that you have enjoyed hearing what has happened in 2020. I'm going to give you a preview of coming attractions. First of all, I would like to share with you that first on the list is Amherst, Massachusetts. They adopted ranked choice voting in 2018, and they are going to hopefully implement it in 2021. As of this time, the city fathers and the committee that is driving this are meeting this week for final information, but I'd like to share with you what we have. They hope to have and this is by the Charter Commission who proposed it, that has been accepted by the city, is that they will have offices for ranked choice voting in the town council, and there will be 13 town councilors elected. 3 will be at large, and 2 each will come from 5 different wards. The equipment that they will be using is Dominion ImageCast Precinct, and their equipment for those with disabilities will be ES&S Automark. Next, Easthampton. Easthampton initially accepted and adopted ranked choice voting in 2019, and they will be beginning to implement this year. An ad hoc committee of 7 members were appointed to draft a proposed ordinance for establishing the ballot format and the procedure rules and for casting and counting all ranked choice voting. Ranked choice voting offices are for mayor and city council. They will use the single winner method. The equipment that they use is the Dominion ImageCast Precinct, and also they use for their accessibility ES&S's Automark. Next is New York City. They adopted it in 2019, and it initially begins February 2nd of 2021. RCV offices are for city primaries and special elections. Voters will rank the top 5 candidates first to last choice on the ballot for mayor, comptroller, public advocate, borough president, and city council. They will be using the single winner method. The equipment that they will be using is ES&S DS200, and for those with disabilities, the Automark. One of the things that I would like to call to your attention, as I previously mentioned, a special election has been scheduled for February 2nd, 2021, which will probably be the first in our new year to fill a vacancy for Council District 24 located in Queens. The New York City Board of Elections has scheduled to publish an RFP, which was let this week for software to be submitted to do the RCV tallying, and the contract date will be January 15th. And a little bit of shameless self-promotion, we will be submitting our RFP to the city for consideration. Las Cruces was adopted RCV in 2018, and it was first implemented in 2019. The RCV offices are for city elections, and Las Cruces has staggered terms for their council district. So in 2021, they will be having elections for city districts 3, 5, and 6. And also a municipal judge may be on the ballot. The equipment that they will be using is Dominion ImageCast Evolution. In Minneapolis, they adopted it first in 2006, and their offices are for mayor, city council, park board, and the tax board. And they use single and multi-winner methods. Voters may rank up to 3 choices per office, and they use ES&S DS200 and Automark They have been very forward-thinking in sharing their experiences and their methods with others in the United States, and we're very thankful for that. Also, St. Paul, Minnesota. Ranked choice voting was adopted in 2009, and the RCV offices that they run are for mayor and council. They used a single winner method and can rank up to 6 choices. They use, for their voting equipment, the Hart InterCivic Verity Scan and Verity Touch Writer for those with disabilities. San Francisco, probably the oldest on the list of current people, not jurisdictions that use ranked choice voting, adopted it in 2002. They use RCV for lots of their offices. One is mayor, city attorney, board of supervisors, sheriff, district attorney, treasurer, assessor, recorder, public defender, and they have staggered terms. And in 2021, the numbered Board of Supervisor districts that will be up for election are the even numbered districts. They use the Dominion ImageCast Evolution and ImageCast X for their disabilities feature. Now, going forward to what the ranked choice voting will be doing, we have several projects underway, but 2 I would like to call to your attention. States, what we are doing is a project to determine all the states' ranked choice voting readiness assessments. This includes, but not limited to, their state election laws that are applicable. Also, what needs to be amended, added, and also their current election administration's procedures, and also ballot layout design, ballot counting and centralization of election night results, and also official canvass results. Election voting equipment and the ability to produce a cast vote record is very important to ensure that things can be done with legacy equipment. And assessments are very thorough. To give you an example, I have reviewed an example of Washington State, and the report itself is 22 pages long. So I think that everyone will understand what we're doing and how we're doing it. And this is a living document that will always be changed to be current. Another thing that I would like to call to your attention is that we're coming out with approximately a 7 to 7.5 minute video that talks about the benefits of ranked choice voting and the ranked choice voting universal tabulator. This should be completed by the end of this year, and we think that it will be very concise, and it could open a lot of doors for people to have open minds for this type of voting method. And we encourage everyone that's interested to take a look, listen, and hopefully share it with everybody that you can be in contact with. With that said, even though we got more things that we're doing, that's just a preview, and we hope that you have enjoyed everything we have done today. And I'll turn it back over to Chris.
unmute myself first. Thanks, Gary. Yeah, we do. I mean, there's a lot to look forward to. There's a lot that happened this year. We hope this helped scratch some of that itch for you all just to get started on learning about, what ranked choice voting is and how it works and where it's used, because there's always more to learn. Yeah, and thanks everyone on the team for pulling this together. It's been a very busy year for the Resource Center, as I'm sure it's been for everybody else, especially with the pandemic raging. So I'm glad we pulled this together. As we mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, today's webinar has been recorded and we are about to hold a brief Q&A session. We've had a lot of great comments in the chat, so I'm going to make sure to broadcast those out to everybody so we make sure everybody has the most up-to-date information on all of these adoptions, and we'll try and dig deeper on some of the questions people posed. A recording and supplemental Q&A document will be available on our website sometime after Thanksgiving. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Instagram. We, as I mentioned earlier, we also have a podcast called RCV Clips, which is available anywhere fine podcasts are downloaded. Thank you again for joining us today, and now let's dive into the Q&A. I think one thing that people were really interested in hearing about was how, what happened in Massachusetts. And I held back on covering that because, we aren't the campaign. I don't really want to tell their story for them. We want to make sure that they're the ones leading the message, but we luckily have someone from the campaign in the chat, Andy Anderson, who I thought gave a really good explanation of what happened in Massachusetts, why the ballot measure there failed. And I know that there's a lot more to learn in Massachusetts when we look at ballot level data, we look at the detailed information out of there. Give me 1 second, I'm pulling up that chat. We've had a lot of comments come through. And while I'm doing that, I actually sent a message in the chat about Amherst having staggered elections, and that was wrong. So I retract that information. Where is Andy's comment? Shoot. Well, I'm not seeing that comment right now, but Again, I don't want to sort of opine on this yet because I think there's still a lot of dust to clear. There's a lot to still understand about what happened in Massachusetts. And I mean, there's still a lot to learn about what happened in all the elections this year. And there's still, looks like Andy may have accidentally deleted his comment. But I think the sense right now is, and this is something I heard in interviews with the organizers of the campaign for the podcast, is that one of the most important thing in getting people to support ranked choice voting is helping them understand it. It is like when you educate people about it, they tend to latch onto it as an idea. And that became a lot harder when the pandemic hit because they couldn't have face-to-face contact with potential voters. They couldn't sort of pass the message along in people's networks face to face, and it was just harder to get in touch with people because of the in-person barriers created by the pandemic and the difficulty of reaching people via text and phone. But I'm sure there's, I think it's a really complex question, and I'm really interested to see, where the conversation goes and what we can learn about what happened in Massachusetts and what happened in Alaska, what went well, what didn't, and what are all of our lessons from all these different implementation or ballot measure campaigns this fall. Let's see, let me pull up. Finding another question. We had a lot of chat, and I know we're already at our hour. So, if people have other things to do, please go ahead and do that. And if everybody wants to turn on their webcams, so if we do have any questions for people, we can throw those to you. Thank you. A lot of connection issue questions. So Eric Bidstrup asked, and this one I'm going to throw to you, George. In Alameda, it's have the winners been posted and the RCV tabulation hasn't been, or are we still not clear on who the winners are in those ranked choice voting elections as well? You're muted, George.
We do not know who the winners are. They have not posted any of the RCV tabulations, so I have not found anything on the web, at least at this point, that gives us final results. Those that, some of those contests we do know, the, say, first choice candidate had, 45, 48%, and generally those end up being winners, although that's not necessarily the case. So, but no, we don't have the Alameda County winners yet.
Okay. And I saw a question from Jean Albert. Did Eureka have a runoff provision before they adopted ranked choice voting, or were elections just sort of happening with every candidate running in one election?
So they were actually having runoffs in Eureka, as far as I understand. Yeah.
Okay. We also got a question about audit systems for risk limiting audits. If we've had a couple podcasts and webinars about risk limiting audits. I won't get into the weeds because it's a very knotty issue. But last year there was a pilot risk limiting audit of ranked choice voting in San Francisco. We haven't heard anything, and I can't say that this information doesn't exist, but we haven't heard anything about updates to that audit for the election this year. But we will be sure to look into that and provide any additional information in the written document in response to these questions. Alvaro Guevara says, is there a graphic or a GIF to share widely that can explain to us, he says, quote, normal people, how ranked choice voting works? He's saying people are unlikely to read a paragraph about how ranked choice voting works. So he's curious. I'd be curious if people want to throw these in the chat, or if anybody on the panel has seen a short animation that they think really communicates ranked choice voting well.
Well, I thought you talked about Benton County earlier, and if people want to go to that Benton County website, what is it, Better Benton something? They had a pretty cute, and a very simple, very straightforward video that I thought was very good. So that's one suggestion.
Yeah, that's the BentonBetterBallot.com.
Chris, I noticed that Angela asked how many jurisdictions were using the universal tabulator. That may be of interest to folks out there. At this point, of course, Eastpointe, where Angela is very familiar, is using it. It was prepared for use in Takoma Park, Maryland, so it will be used there. They've used it in Utah, in both of the jurisdictions in Utah that conduct ranked choice voting last year. They have used it in Benton County as well. They use it as a verification tool in Benton County. They don't use it since ES&S does their elections. They use the ES&S software to do their tabulation, but then they verify the accuracy of that tabulation using the universal RCV tabulator. And as Gary mentioned, we will be submitting the RCV tabulator as a potential tool for use in New York City.
Right. Yeah, that sounds like a comprehensive list of everywhere that has thought about using it, has used it, is potentially going to use it.
And we use it regularly to verify election results in a number of jurisdictions, including the state of Maine, Minnesota, and a variety of others. We often run when those jurisdictions that publish their cast vote records, and so we're able to obtain those cast vote records. We often run those to verify that we're getting the same results that they do.
And that's
so far, so
good.
Chris, this is Rosemary. Just that whole question about where the universal tabulator is being used, it sounds like we need to add a new graphic to our tabulator page on our website.
You gotcha. Always more to do on the website. I saw too, Vicki Dalton had a great suggestion, and this is stuff we have internally but have not made public, but just a suggestion that we, on our list of jurisdictions using ranked choice voting, list out contact information, websites for those jurisdictions, and a summary of their voting equipment and software. And, we do have all that internally, but we haven't found out, I think my hesitation is we haven't found a pretty way to put it on the website yet, but we clearly, I think it'd be valuable for people to have. We've got a lot of, we have a lot of questions. I'm just having a hard time choosing where to go. Will the assessments be on our website, and will they be free? Rosemary, Kelly, Gary.
Sorry, I was muted. Yes, they will be on our website, and they will be free. We also are sort of exploring how we could even have them put into actual print with a nice template and cover and everything. And I have to find some funding for that. But we do want to try and keep the information free to folks who are working on the ground, who are establishing relationships with administrators and policymakers, and just really trying to make sure everybody's talking the same language.
You gotcha. Oh, Gary, you're muted.
You're still muted, Gary.
Lord have mercy. I've been talking away and nobody's heard a word I said. Well, thank you for your patience. Rosemary is correct. We are going to try to do everything we can to provide the information, and just want everybody to know that what we have on the website and every document that we produce is a living document that we will try to update as things change, because we want everyone to have the most current information, and we want to be the go-to person not only for interested public but also for election officials, policy holders, and any government entity that needs our information. We are there as it relates to research, education, and training, and we welcome your interest.
Absolutely. Well, we are now at an hour and 10. I know we have more questions we can get to, but I think I'm going to end the webinar now, and I know there's some follow-up research we definitely will be able to do to get really good answers to some of these questions people have. So thanks again, everyone, for tuning in today and sticking through those connection issues. I think that's a good note for us to make next time around in the intro. If you're having issues, use that reconnect button. Make sure you only have the webinar open on your computer. Anyway, thanks again. Really appreciate all the great feedback in the chat, and we will post the recording soon. Happy Thanksgiving, and stay safe, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, y'all.